Andy Dunn was a name that made headlines. He co-founded an online startup that sold for a staggering $310 million. But behind the success story lies a tale of struggle that he kept hidden for years. For 16 long years, Andy lived in denial of his bipolar disorder. He was a master of disguise, masking his illness so well that no one around him suspected a thing. But as he climbed the ladder of success, his disorder slowly started to wreak havoc on his personal and professional life. This is a story of the damage that bipolar disorder can inflict on someone's life. But it's also a story of how this illness can amplify human potential to levels unimaginable. Join us on a gripping tale that will help you understand the realities of bipolar disorder. We'll take you through the triggers that cause hypomania, mania, and depression. You'll learn why it's so hard to spot and diagnose this condition, and why it's a much more common condition than you might think. We'll also explore the connection between entrepreneurship and bipolar disorder. At its best, hypomania drives creativity and productivity, along with confidence, optimism, and vision, all of which are required for success in business. But the price of this success can be steep, and Andy is the perfect example of that. But be warned, this is not a comfortable story. We'll tackle themes of mental illness, suicidal thoughts, and domestic violence. It's a wild ride that might make you uneasy, but it's also a story that needs to be told. So join us as we accept Andy's invitation to deal with mental illness openly and without shame. And who knows, you might even learn a thing or two about how a CEO with bipolar disorder can still build a successful company. Chapter 1. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, Andy Dunn had it all: a family full of doctors, intelligence beyond his years, and a drive to succeed. But as a mixed-race kid, he struggled with feelings of otherness and learned to push aside his vulnerability. It wasn't until college that he discovered the world of entrepreneurship and became enamored with the jet-setting lifestyle. With internships and well-connected friends, Andy felt unstoppable until he fell head over heels for a girl named Camilla, and everything changed. As he experimented with psychedelic drugs, he felt on top of the world until the inevitable crash. This is the story of how Andy's highs and lows led to a battle with bipolar disorder, and how he learned to confront the stigma and shame around mental illness. It's a story of hope, struggle, and the power of vulnerability. Chapter 2. After being released from the hospital, Andy struggles to come to terms with his manic episode. He starts seeing a therapist and taking medication to manage his bipolar disorder, but he can't shake the feeling that he's lost something important. He's not the same person he was before, and he's not sure who he's supposed to be now. As he tries to rebuild his life, he's haunted by the memories of his manic delusions and the damage they caused. But he's also driven by a newfound sense of purpose. He wants to use his experience to help others who are struggling with mental illness. As he navigates the ups and downs of his recovery, he learns that vulnerability is not a weakness, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is the willingness to share your story. Chapter 3. Years later, after graduating college and starting a successful career, Andy begins to notice changes in his mood and behavior. He's not sleeping, he's taking risks, and he's becoming increasingly grandiose in his thinking. Despite the warning signs, he refuses to acknowledge that he might be experiencing another manic episode. But as his behavior becomes more and more erratic, he starts to lose control of his life and his relationships. It's not until he hits rock bottom and loses everything that he finally faces his diagnosis and begins to take steps towards managing his bipolar disorder. But even as he works towards stability, the ghosts of his past continue to haunt him, and he must learn to navigate his condition while also confronting the shame and fear that have held him back for so long. Chapter 4. As Andy and Spally worked to build Bonobos, Andy found himself becoming more and more invested in the project. He loved the idea of disrupting the traditional retail industry and providing a better experience for customers. He poured all of his energy into the company, working long hours and sacrificing his personal life to make it a success. And it paid off. Bonobos became a huge success, with its unique approach to men's pants and online retail resonating with customers. The company grew rapidly and eventually caught the attention of big players in the industry. But as bonobos became more successful, Andy's mental health began to suffer. The stress of running a growing business, combined with his bipolar disorder, led to a manic episode that nearly derailed everything he had worked so hard for. As he struggled to regain control, Andy realized that he needed to confront his diagnosis and get the help he needed. With the support of his friends and colleagues, he was able to get the treatment he needed and return to bonobos with a newfound sense of purpose. With his bipolar disorder under control and a renewed passion for the business, Andy and Spali took bonobos to even greater heights, eventually selling it to Walmart for hundreds of millions of dollars. And through it all, Andy learned that sometimes the greatest obstacle to success is the one that lies within ourselves. Chapter 5. As bonobos grows, Andy's hypomania begins to escalate, and he starts to make increasingly erratic decisions. His relationship with his co-founder, Spali, becomes strained, and his behavior becomes increasingly reckless. As the pressure mounts, Andy finds himself on the brink of another manic episode, unsure of whether he can keep his bipolar disorder under control. Will he be able to save his company and himself, or will he spiral out of control once again? Chapter 6. As Andy struggled to keep his mental illness hidden and maintain his successful business, he found himself caught in a dangerous spiral of depression and substance abuse. With his relationship with his co-founder deteriorating and his personal life in shambles, Andy was facing the possibility of losing everything he had worked so hard to build. But little did he know that his struggles would ultimately lead him to confront his demons and come out stronger on the other side. Would he be able to find the help he needed to overcome his illness and build a successful future for himself and his business? Chapter 7. But as Andy's hypomania reached its peak, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He started showing up late to meetings and making impulsive decisions that put the company at risk. His colleagues started to notice, and some even expressed concern about his mental health. Andy refused to acknowledge that anything was wrong, insisting that he was just passionate and dedicated to the success of the company. But the truth was that his hypomania had escalated to full-blown mania, and he was spiraling out of control. One night, he had a breakdown in his apartment, trashing the place and screaming at the top of his lungs. His neighbors called the police, and Andy was taken to the hospital for psychiatric evaluation. The diagnosis was clear. He was experiencing a severe manic episode. For the next few months, Andy was in and out of the hospital as his doctors tried to stabilize his mood with medication. Bonobos suffered in his absence, and his colleagues struggled to keep the company afloat without him. Eventually, they were forced to sell the company to a larger retail chain, and Andy was left with nothing but a pile of medical bills and a tarnished reputation. But even as he hit rock bottom, Andy refused to give up. He started a new company, this time with a focus on mental health awareness and support for entrepreneurs struggling with mental illness. And although he still struggled with bipolar disorder, he was determined to use his experience to help others and make a positive impact in the world. Chapter 8. Andy's struggle with his inner demons continued, as he tried to keep bonobos afloat while grappling with the realization that the root of his problems might be within himself. The pressure of being constantly watched and scrutinized by venture capitalists added to his stress, and his leadership style became increasingly erratic. Even his attempts at therapy and medication left him feeling hopeless and alone, with no one to share his burden. As he continued to struggle, the question remained: could he conquer his inner demons and save his company, or would the weight of his past and present challenges prove too much to bear? Chapter 9. Andy's loved ones are relieved that he's coming down from his manic episode. However, they are also worried about the aftermath, as he's posted online about being engaged to a woman he's never met. They're not sure how to approach the situation, so they reach out to Manuela, who has no idea who Andy is. She's terrified by the situation and doesn't know how to respond. Meanwhile, Andy is struggling to regain his grip on reality. He realizes that he's made a fool of himself and that the people he loves are worried about him. He's ashamed and embarrassed by his behavior, and he can't believe that he's let his manic episode get so out of control. As he begins to recover, he starts seeing a therapist and taking medication. He apologizes to his friends and family for his behavior and tries to make amends for the harm he's caused. He knows that he has a long road ahead of him, but he's determined to stay on the path to recovery. Manuela, for her part, is sympathetic to Andy's situation. She understands that he's struggling with a mental illness, and she doesn't hold his behavior against him. They start talking more frequently, and Andy is grateful to have someone in his life who understands what he's going through. He's still embarrassed by the whole situation, but he's hopeful that he can move past it and build a better future for himself. Chapter 10. As Andy resumed his role as CEO, he focused on making changes to improve the company's financial situation. He brought back Brian Wolf as CFO and implemented a new strategy that emphasized profitability over rapid growth. But as the company stabilized, Andy's personal life began to unravel once again. He struggled to balance his responsibilities at work with his relationship with Manuela, and his mood swings continued to take a toll on him. One day, after a particularly difficult meeting with the board, he disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he had gone or when he would return. As the days turned into weeks, bonobos began to spiral out of control, and Andy's colleagues and friends were left wondering whether he would ever come back. Chapter 11. Manuela and her mother rush Andy to the hospital, where he's diagnosed with a severe manic episode. He's admitted for treatment, and it takes several weeks for him to stabilize. During his hospital stay, he reflects on the damage his bipolar disorder has caused to himself and those around him. He decides to step down as CEO of Bonobos and focus on his mental health. Manuela sticks by his side and they work on their relationship. With therapy and medication, Andy eventually finds a sense of stability and peace. He knows he will always have to manage his illness, but he's grateful for the love and support that helps him do so. Chapter 12. Andy faced the consequences of his actions and was committed to mental wellness, seeking help from a psychiatrist and a therapist, as well as being open about his bipolar disorder at work. With the support of his loved ones, he learned to approach mental illness without stigma and found a medication that worked for him. He and Manuela worked through their challenges and rebuilt their relationship. Chapter 13. Andy, a successful entrepreneur, struggles with his bipolar disorder. Despite regular therapy and medication, things can quickly go downhill in the absence of sleep. After a manic episode in front of his parents, he finally seeks emergency psychiatric treatment and takes his illness seriously. With his newfound transparency and treatment, he is able to sell his company for $310 million and start a family with his partner, Manuela. 3 years later, they are back in the hospital, but this time for the birth of their son, Isaiah. Andy feels fiercely protective and strong, knowing that he will do everything in his power to manage his illness for his son's sake. Summary. Andy's experience teaches us the importance of acknowledging and treating mental illness as a real illness, just like any physical health condition. We should use language that reflects this, avoiding stigmatizing phrases like, is bipolar, and instead saying, has bipolar disorder. Mental illness is treatable with therapy, medication, regular check-ins, and transparency, and seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Now, the insights and knowledge I gained from reading Burn Rate were phenomenal. I highly recommend it. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and if you found value in this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more great content. Trust me, you won't regret it.